What's going on YouTube? My name is Tapnuo and I'm a techno artist from Los Angeles. Today's video is for the DJs and for the fans of techno, specifically minimal techno. These are 10 tracks in the minimal era of 04 to 08 that I feel you should know. And I will break down reasons why as I go through each track, but I just feel that knowledge is power when it comes to music, and I want to take a strong stand against any sort of gatekeeping, any sort of elitism. I feel that there's a lot of that going on right now in the scene, and this is just the approach I want to take. I want to share as much knowledge as I can and as much as I can from all of you in the community. So let's start with the first track. This is from 08, and it is the Zimmermann's Wüstenmond, if I'm pronouncing that right, remix of Sahara by Özer. And this is, as you can see, it's like 16 minutes long almost, and it's a great track. It's from that era when they were doing those really long tracks, the type of stuff that you could just leave on that third or fourth CDJ and blend in over time, bring it in and out, and you don't lose the groove. And personally, if you're listening to this track and if you're DJing this track, I feel my favorite part is the first like 32 bars because it's a little more stripped down. You get these nice elements that come in throughout, very spacey vibes, very trippy, but the snare on this, or the clap, whatever it is, the mix is so cool. It's got this like really wide clap, but it doesn't go out of phase or anything. It's truly a fantastic record, and I actually don't even know how I found this, but let's continue. Number 2. This would be the Ricardo Villalobos remix of Blood on My Hands by Shackleton. And similar theme, really long track. I mean, this one's over 18, it's almost 19. And this is a great track to start a mix with. Has the craziest vocals on it. And it's got this like bass line that fades in and out that is one of the most hypnotic things I've ever heard. I actually don't know how he made it, but that's why Villalobos is like a legend in minimal, right? He just has these textures, and it truly is a texture when you listen to this record. And this one is from 07, again, that peak era. I personally feel between around 02 to maybe even 09, 2010 is the best era for minimal techno, because it was like there was such an emphasis on how much can you do with rules, basically. Like, and I think with rules comes creativity. And this record, you can tell when he made it, he had some rules in mind. Like, the concept is so simple, but again, talking about that simple but effective approach, this record really embodies that. Now let's go on to number 3. From 2004, we have O Balada Gris by Alex Under. And Alex Under is an amazing producer. This guy is, like, in my opinion, one of the kings of minimal techno. He still makes music, but I think his more modern stuff is not the same sound as it was in the mid-2000s. And granted, as artists, you know, it's kind of imperative that you evolve. So I really don't blame him for changing his style a little bit. And other minimal artists from that era have also changed their sound slightly, but that's what I love, is I think there's going to be a shift where this sound of minimal techno comes back, because everything to a certain extent is inspired by something before, right? So I think we're going to get a new wave of minimal techno that has the essence of the mid-2000s, but with the touch of modern production. And what I love about this record is it has these like chords on it, right? And so when you're DJing this record, it really is nice to, like, you don't even have to layer in that much with it because it stands out so strong on its own, and the mix down is really clean too. So this one, like, it's that kind of track where you don't even need to listen to it. Like, it's just a genuinely good song. So let's keep going. The next record is track by Panpot, and this is from 07. Well, it's a Panpot remix of Damian Schwartz called Verde Confeti. And some of these things I know I'm probably not pronouncing correctly, but I really don't care. So This track is really crazy because anyone who knows Panpot in the modern era knows that they do not do minimal techno. They do like warehouse techno. I mean, they run Second State. They, you know, artists like Amelie Lenz have come up because of Panpot. And this track actually is very similar to that Alex Under track I just discussed, in that it's got this like clean mix down and some cool little chords too, but it's got like this on it that is, it's a crazy simple melody and it's so effective. And this one I would say is nice to layer in with other tracks. It layers in a little more clean because there's a little more space on it. The chords on that previous record take up a little more of the audio space, audio spectrum. But this record is, it's crazy that Panpot used to make stuff like this. I just think if you're a fan of Panpot and you haven't heard this record, it'll really show how far they've actually come. And that goes back to what I was saying earlier about artists evolving. I think it's really beautiful that Panpot has evolved into who they are now. And I hope that they never lose their minimal roots. And I know that they've been involved in the scene even longer than 07. So it's cool to see the longevity that artists have. Now, the next would be Signs by Heartthrob. And this one is from 08. And this one has like a, I don't know how to explain it. It's the type of sound that in my head when I hear it, I picture like an assembly line, like a factory. It's got this like doon 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 doon. It's got a really cool melody that throughout the record starts out kind of funky, and then it turns into this like huge fat synthesizer playing the same melody, and they really mess with the modulation on it. And I mean, if you're a fan of minimal, I would say Heartthrob is a go-to artist. Heartthrob back in the day was doing his thing. And I don't personally know if Heartthrob is still doing a lot of stuff. I think so. But in terms of the stuff I've checked out by Heartthrob, it's all around 08. And this record, I think, perfectly sums up Heartthrob's sound from that era. Now, let's go on to the next. Tungsteno by Jitzu from 2007. This track is, first of all, the mixdown is it's a unique mixdown in the sense that it's very punchy, but it's not overwhelming. Like the drums on this just knock, and it's crazy because it doesn't have like that much sub, but it just hits on a sound system with bass. And this record has one of the coolest melodies and one of the coolest, I guess, instruments or synthesizers playing that melody. It almost sounds like someone playing a, how would I explain that? It sounds like air. It sounds like someone blowing air out of a canister, or playing like a kazoo, or it sounds almost like a woodwind or flute type instrument, but it's like a digital version of that, and it's very distorted. And this record is, it sums up that sort of era in minimal where it was like the most simple melody evolving ever so slightly over time, and the genius behind like how that has to interact with drums that have these very glitchy elements. This is a very glitchy track, and that's part of the reason I love it so much. And it's very DJable too. There's a lot of parts in the track, either at the end or even in the middle, that you can loop and you never lose the groove. And then once you loop it, you can then keep that and hold that and start to layer that into other records. And even if you want, just keep the drums and keep the knock of the low frequency of the drums and then layer things on top of it. And there's also a really good remix of this track. So if you check out this record and you like it, check out the Master remix. Now, here we go. Marco Carola, Pallegio Ultimate Mix from 07. This track is a little more on the melodic side, but it has just an absolutely hypnotic melody, and it's a much happier track. It's not a very angry track. That previous Jitzu Tungsteno track is a little more dark, but this record by Marco Carola is, I don't even know if it would qualify as something like house or tech house, because it's very much a techno record. The first part of the record, it's just drum, and then personally, when I DJ this, I set a cue point for when the melody first comes in, because you kind of have options when you DJ this record. Either just bring in the drums and kind of let it naturally fade in, or you do a hard cut right to that melodic point. And side note, for the sake of copyright purposes, I'm not playing any of the tracks today, but feel free to go ahead and check these out yourself, check out these artists. But this record by Marco Carola is from an era when Marco Carola, I feel, was at his peak. Nowadays, he does a little more tech house, a little more, I don't know if that like Miami is the word, but it's like a very like day, like beach party sound, versus this 07, 06, mid 2000 stuff he was doing was super raw. And this is it's a raw Marco Carola track. The whole EP that this is on is very good. I can't remember the name of the release right now off the top of my head, but highly recommend this track. Highly recommend Marco Carola, and dig through old Marco Carola sets. His old sets from this era are some of the best, at least for minimal techno, that I've ever heard. The way he blends things in. And it's crazy because like he doesn't really play this specific track in a lot of his sets. You really have to dig through his catalog to find it. Now, let's go on to, what would this be? Number 7? No, number 8, 9. Yeah, so number 8. So a very little known artist. And this artist, I don't know how much music they actually have. I know very little about them. Obviously, everyone knows Dolly Parton, but the minimal techno artist would be Dolly Parton. And this is a record from 2005. And I don't think it's on iTunes. I don't think it's on Spotify. I had to dig this off of Bandcamp. I think Dolly Parton does have a Bandcamp. So shout out to Dolly Parton if you're still rocking today. But this record is called The Power, and it samples that classic song, you know, I've got the power. But the way they sample it is such a genius sample, because the bass line that they bring in, it works so well, and it almost sounds like they found the musicality of that sample and then integrated that into the bass line that they generated. And it has like, it's again a very like happy, not even happy, it's just not that dark of a record, right? And it has like a really nice like party vibe. And the sample is not obnoxious either. It's very tastefully added. The drum on this, a lot of like nice syncopation that happens, a lot of bounce. And the mix, personally, the mix down, I think, you know, it's from 05, so maybe the equipment they were using or something wasn't the best. It's not a bad mix down. It's just like when you're trying to blend this and scoop out with a DJ mixer, like certain frequencies, it can clash. So I would say if you're DJing this record, practice with it a few times and like find a you can loop and then figure out what parts of the record you actually want to sculpt out. Because there's a lot of high frequencies in this, and there's also the mid-range is kind of strong. So just try and figure out how you can layer it in. That's the thing. Personally, whenever I DJ this record, I sometimes have to like think about it, if that makes sense, and like tastefully bring it in without having it be overpowering. But if you're listening to this record just on its own, it goes. It like, you don't even need to play it in a set. Really, you could just add it to, you know, whatever playlist you have. I mean, I know it's not on streaming, but if you purchase the record even just to listen to it for yourself, I can't recommend this record enough. Dolly Parton actually has a lot of other good songs that are from this same era. So it could even be, and this is just pure speculation, I don't have evidence of this, but just from the name, it could be almost like a side project of another artist. Because I do hear some similarities with certain artists from that era. So maybe it's a side project, but the point is definitely check this record. So number 9 would be Techno Vocals by Marc Houle from 2007. And this track is really ahead of its time, because you listen to, and if you're like me, if you listen to that sort of mid 2000s minimal, I mean, yes, some of it does sound like it's from that era. A lot of it really does hold up today. And a lot of it really was ahead of its time. But I think if you want to look at one particular track from that era that stands up today and sounds like it was made today, it's this song by Marc Houle. And the reason I say that is it has these like trippy pitch down vocals, and it's almost like how in electronic music, you know, people will make songs about like house music songs about house music or techno songs about techno. And it's almost like a self-aware record, and that's why I like it, because it doesn't take itself too seriously. And I think this record, and this again is speculation, but just based on what I have heard and both as a fan, but also in the development of the sound over the years, I think this record might be one of Sion's inspirations. And what's crazy is Sion and Marc Houle actually do have a project together, a collab called Marcian. But this song, like if you listen to Sion's catalog, and then if you go back and listen to this song, which was released way before most stuff Sion put out, you can hear Sion in this song. And when I say that, you can hear specifically the vocals, but the sort of throbbing aspects of the song, it kind of creeps up on you, and it has like a really nice counter melody that comes in later in the record. It's a good track to start off a mix with. I don't know if anyone checked out my cast off podcast mix, but I did open with this record. It blends in really nicely with a lot of modern techno. You can even, you know, loop it and layer it in, or even just play a very small section of it. I mean, the vocals alone, like if you just want to loop that part, it's a great record. And really just like, I can't emphasize this enough. It is so ahead of its time. It's insane. Like even if this came out 5 years from now, it would still sound like it came out from in the future, if that makes sense. And last but not least, number 10, this track, before I even say the artist or the year or anything like that, if you're going to check out a track that kind of embodies like what mid 2000s minimal techno was, it is this record. It is the Someone Else remix of I Am You by Fusiphorm from 2006. And if you've listened to any of my sets, I've played this record. I think I might even play this record too much. And I really don't even care, because I'll play it a million times until the day I die. It's that good. It kind of embodies like the bounce of that era of techno. It embodies the glitchiness, because that era was like way more glitchy than a lot of the modern warehouse stuff that we hear, or the hard techno that we hear now. And I like it because there's something about it that is really goofy, and it doesn't take itself too seriously. And the way that they sampled the vocals, because if you listen to the original I Am You by Fusiphorm, there's a lot of similarities, but Someone Else, and if you're not familiar with Someone Else, I think might be one of the greatest artists from that era. There's an album by Someone Else called, I think it's called Pen Caps and Colored Pencils. Definitely check that out. I mean, really that whole album, like I could just do a breakdown of that album alone on why it's so genius, and maybe I will in a future video. But Someone Else really, I think, drove the sound forward and embodies that sort of glitchy production so well. Like I don't think anyone really does it like Someone Else. And I might be mistaken, but I have read online that Someone Else might have passed away a couple years ago. So I'm going to have to check up on that. But if so, definitely rest in peace, because the stuff that Someone Else was making just still blows my mind to this day. And it still holds up, of course. But this record, it really works with a lot of things. It's kind of it gets busy in certain sections, but that's what's so cool about it. It has this like contrast of there's sections like this breakdown that are just so stripped down and like to the point. But then there's other parts that there's a lot going on, but nothing is like overcomplicated. Like it all makes sense. And in this record, mixing out this record, there's a lot of possibilities. The other cool thing that I like about it is the bass on it is really nice. It has a super bouncy, super funky bass line. And it's weird because there's like house elements in it, and there's like other genre elements in it, but it's such a minimal techno track to its core. And it's the kind of thing where like I can't really explain it. Like you just have to go listen to it and you'll understand like that sort of glitchy kind of like making a melody out of something that is not necessarily a melody. I love that concept, and this record really embodies that concept. Like the riff on it is made from the vocals, but also certain other glitchy parts, and it's the kind of riff that like you'll hear over and over in your head, but it's not like it's you couldn't play it on a piano. That's what's so cool about it. So just a couple records to think about.